stories fade with time, buried beneath silence, lost in forgotten files, or dismissed as mysteries that will never be solved. But behind every case is a voice that was never heard, a truth still waiting in the dark. This channel is dedicated to the victims, the unanswered questions, and the stories that refuse to disappear. Because somewhere, someone still knows what happened. Welcome to Cries Unheard in the Darkness. On May 23, 1934, the most romanticized crime spree in American history ended in a hail of 167 steel-jacketed bullets. But to understand the violence of Bonnie and Clyde, you have to understand the poverty and brutal prison systems that forged them. Clyde Chestnut Barrow was born in 1909 into a poor farming family in Tellico, Texas. When they moved to Dallas, they lived under their wagon because they couldn't afford a tent. The Barrows were invisible. For Clyde, crime started as survival, stealing turkeys and failing to return a rental car. By 1930, he was a known safecracker and auto thief. In January 1930, Clyde dropped by a friend's house. There, making hot chocolate, was 19-year-old Bonnie Parker. Bonnie was a poet who loved the spotlight. She had married at 15 to Roy Thornton, but he was frequently in jail. When she met Clyde, she saw a way out of her waitressing job. She smuggled a gun into jail to help him escape his first major conviction, beginning a cycle of devotion and crime. Their romance was interrupted when Clyde was sent to Eastham Prison Farm, a place of hard labor and unimaginable brutality. Clyde was assaulted by another inmate. He retaliated by crushing the man's skull with a pipe. It was his first murder. To escape the grueling fieldwork, he had 2 of his own toes amputated. He was paroled in February 1932. He walked with a permanent limp, and his soul was hardened. Fellow inmates said he had changed from a schoolboy to a rattlesnake. He didn't want money. He wanted revenge on the Texas prison system. April 1932. After a failed hardware store burglary, Bonnie was jailed writing poetry to pass the time. Meanwhile, Clyde became a killer. In Hillsborough, store owner J.N. Butcher was shot dead. In Oklahoma, Clyde killed Deputy Eugene Moore, the first law officer to fall. By 1933, the gang included Clyde's brother Buck and his wife Blanche. They lived in a cramped apartment, fueled by beer and card games. On April 13th, police arrived thinking they were raiding bootleggers. Instead, they walked into a war zone. 2 officers were killed. The gang escaped, but they left behind rolls of undeveloped film. The image of Bonnie with a cigar spread across the nation, painting her as a gun moll. In reality, it was 5 people living in a car, bickering, taking a bath in cold streams, and cooking over campfires. On June 10, 1933, near Wellington, Texas, Clyde flipped their car into a ravine. Battery acid doused Bonnie's right leg. The skin on her leg was burned away, and in places you could see the bone. Bonnie would never walk properly again. For the rest of her life, Clyde carried her in his arms. In July 1933, the law closed in at Platte City. In a fierce shootout, Buck Barrow was shot through the head. The gang escaped to Dexfield Park, Iowa, where they were surrounded by over 100 spectators and police. Buck was captured and died days later. Blanche was blinded by glass and taken into custody. Despite being hunted, Clyde orchestrated the Eastham breakout in January 1934 to free associates like Henry Methvin. During the escape, Major Joe Croson was killed. This was the final straw. Prison Chief Lee Simmons vowed that everyone involved would be hunted down and killed. He turned to a legend, Captain Frank Hamer. Hamer was the walking embodiment of the Texas Rangers. He had 53 kills to his name. While other Rangers refused to hunt the gang because they didn't want to shoot a woman, Hamer had no such reservations. He lived out of his car, always just one town behind Clyde. Easter Sunday, at a quiet intersection in Grapevine, Texas. 2 patrolmen stopped to help what they thought was a stranded motorist. They were met with shotgun blasts. Sensational news reports claimed Bonnie laughed as an officer's head bounced like a rubber ball. Though likely a lie, it turned the public against her. Governor Ma Ferguson placed a specific price on Bonnie's head. Frank Hamer's posse was a fragile alliance of 6 men from 3 different agencies, all of whom distrusted one another. Hamer found his leverage in Ivy Methvin, the father of gang member Henry Methvin. A deal was struck, Henry's life in exchange for Bonnie and Clyde. On the morning of May 23rd, the posse had Ivy park his truck on the shoulder of a wooded Louisiana roadside. As Clyde slowed the Ford V8 to speak with him, the lawman opened fire without warning. Over 130 rounds were fired in under 2 minutes. Clyde died instantly. Bonnie's final scream haunted the deputies for years. Word of their deaths created a feeding frenzy. 12,000 people flooded the town. One woman cut bloody locks of Bonnie's hair. Another man tried to cut off Clyde's trigger finger as a souvenir. The posse was denied their full bounty, but they still took trophies. Hamer took the guns. Alcorn took Clyde's saxophone. Sheriff Jordan was accused of keeping a suitcase full of cash. In 1935, the law struck the families. 20 friends and family members, including both mothers, were jailed for aiding and abetting. It was a scorched earth policy meant to end the Barrow legacy forever. Bonnie and Clyde wished to be buried side by side, but the Parkers refused. 20,000 people attended Bonnie's funeral. Clyde was buried in Dallas with an epitaph he chose himself, "Gone but not forgotten." The survivors met grim ends. Henry Methvin died drunk on a train track. W.D. Jones was killed in a 1974 misunderstanding. Blanche Barrow lived a quiet life until 1988, forever resenting her screaming, cinematic portrayal. Today, the death car of Bonnie and Clyde is a $250,000 artifact. It sits behind glass in a Nevada casino for visitors to see. In 2011, the Texas Rangers finally honored the victims, like Patrolman Wheeler, whose families had waited 80 years for recognition. The truth wasn't glamour. It was acid, cold streams, and a predictable, bloody end. Bonnie and Clyde remain as they lived, separated by the law, but joined forever in the dark pages of American history. Thanks for listening to Cries, Unheard in the Darkness. If this story stayed with you, you're not alone. Like and subscribe, because the darkness always has more to say. Until next time, listen carefully.